All right, here we are at our third and final work of art that is dealing with specifically um, socialism and communism. However, this is our only example of socialist realism, right? If we look at the Kollwitz is expressionism, German expressionism, even though Kollwitz herself didn't identify with that movement. If we look at the Stepanova, that's Russian constructivism. Now, here we have Chairman Mao en route to Anyuan, and this is socialist realism. So, socialist realism as a movement originates in Russia, not in China. And what it kind of, the way that it is, if you want to sort of describe what is socialist realism, it's work that's meant to be emotionally moving. It's meant to evoke a feeling through very clear depictions of political socialist themes. So usually you're going to see, workers, and they're going to be smiling and apple cheeked. You're going to see soldiers and laborers together. You're going to see children, and you're going to see the communist leadership portrayed in ways that is really valorizing them. This is a very different, this is socialist realism, but it's a little bit different than what we think of as socialist realism, because instead of having a group of people working together, and we'll talk about this more in class, we'll compare it to, remember I brought that, Farish brought that picture in from his room. That's kind of classic socialist realism. You've got a group of people, you've got soldiers and workers together, and they're smiling, and they're in a big group. And, this instead, we've just got Mao by himself. And the other thing that's interesting about socialist realism, if you think about what is the color of communism, it's red, right? So usually socialist realism is going to have a lot of red in it, and reds and warm tones, whereas this is very cool. We'll get to the formal stuff in a little bit, but let's just sort of talk about this as a work. Remember, this is about political propaganda. It's made to make people feel things or want to support the political cause of communism. So we can even look at the medium here. Now, this is a lithograph. Originally, this would have been an oil painting. Again, think about how that's a little bit different than what we've seen from Chinese art up until now. We haven't seen any oil, right? Again, because socialist realism is a movement that comes to China from the West. Well, Russia is sort of like on the border of the West, but from Russia, it's not kind of originally from China. But this would have originally been an oil painting. A lithograph, we don't need to get into the complexities of it, but basically any kind of mass-produced book that you read today that has nice color images in it is made by lithography. So this would have been a mass-produced image. And indeed, this was one of the most popular images of Mao. And let's actually look at a nice bigger version of it. There you go. At the time, and continues to be really, really popular. So again, mass production, we saw that even in the work of Kath Kollwitz when she's using printing techniques. She wants, right, thinking about what are the political motivations. I want more working people to see this. I want this to be easily accessible. I don't want this to be an elite form of work. Everyone should be able to see it. Everyone should be able to enjoy it. So again, with lithography, consider this as something where its democratizing aspect, if anyone can look at it, is very much part of the political movement of that it is part of and advocating for. So let's talk more about the history behind it, and then we can look at the form. So why was this created? This was created for a national exhibition. And if we look at the date, it's in 1969. Now, if you want to think about Mao himself, you're going to think, if you actually kind of get into your history, in 1969, Mao did not look like this, right? Mao was an old man. Mao was about, I think, 80 years old or so by then. This instead is depicting Mao as a young man in 1922 when he led an organized a strike a strike in Anyuan, which is the place where the strike was, of 13,000 miners and railway workers. And this is kind of what puts him on the political map, organizing this strike, successfully arguing and helping to get better wages and working conditions for these workers. It really kind of in fact, many of those workers then go on to join the Red Guard. Like, so they are very moved by him, find him to be a charismatic, politically motivating leader. It's defining of his political career. So what you see here is Mao en route to Anyuan, right? He's walking, like, with purpose towards the strike. Now, why would you do this? Why would you paint this? And the artist, forgive my pronunciation, Liu Chunhua, who was a member of the Red Guard, and he read interviews about the strike. He looked at old photographs from that time to get this sort of sense of history here in this piece. But why is he painting it and submitting it to an exhibition in 1969? Well, this is after the Great Leap Forward, right, which was not the most politically successful tactic and movement that Mao planned. So a lot of suffering results as it. So this is a kind of a recuperative effort to sort of be like, remember when Mao was great? Remember when you really liked him and we all loved him as a leader? So we're seeing him as a young man. And what we get that's very fascinating that the artist does that's so different from traditional works of socialist realism, he takes this Russian form, right, of socialist realism, and he blends it with traditional Chinese elements. So Mao is not wearing that characteristic suit that we come to associate with communism in China. Instead, he's wearing traditional Chinese clothing. We've got these elements of landscape that we really do associate. Remember, in China, landscapes are being painted and used as a subject well before we ever see them in the West, right? Almost 800 years before they become taken seriously as a subject by Western painters. Chinese painters are engaging with landscapes as sort of the highest form of philosophical and religious expression, artistic expression. So we've got this nod to that past with the mountains, with the kind of mist, and you can sort of see the way that combining the landscape with the socialist realist kind of sort of emotional trajectory, you almost have it like Mao is like arising and appearing almost like a god out of the landscape, out of the midst of the mountain. So you kind of get this combination. And again, these kind of cool blue tones, and he's striding forward with purpose. His hand is balled in a fist. But look, he hasn't forgotten his umbrella. He's still a practical leader, right? This is socialism. This is communism. And just as a fun fact, a copy of this was really considered a great work that was really admired all over the world. And there was a copy of it that was hung at the Vatican for a while, which, as you can imagine, is very funny that the Vatican would be supporting communism. It's because when it was given to the Vatican, it was mislabeled as young Chinese missionary. So when finally somebody pointed out and be like, that's actually Mao, they, expediently took it down. So there you go. That is that.